Okay, let's just dive right into this. We've all experienced it, right? Or, at least seen it in the movies. That overwhelming, hit you like a ton of bricks feeling of instant romantic chemistry. You meet someone, and within seconds, something just shifts. Your heart rate picks up, your attention sharpens, and there's this magnetic pull you literally can't explain. Culturally, we call it chemistry, or the spark. We treat it like it's this profound signal from the universe, practically screaming that this person is our destiny. But today, in this explainer, we're going to look at the hard biology behind that feeling. We're unpacking the science of attraction, attachment, and your nervous system to demystify exactly what's going on in your body when you feel that sudden spark. So here's the big question. Is it a message from the universe or a 100-millisecond biological glitch? We really need to challenge this cultural myth right off the bat. What you perceive as this mystical, fated connection, it's actually your brain running a lightning-fast assessment program. Seriously. There's a specialized region in your brain called the fusiform face area. It basically acts like your brain's own built-in facial recognition software. In about 100 milliseconds, which is literally faster than you can blink, it processes a new face, evaluates attractiveness, and scans microexpressions, voice tone, and body language. It computes all this data completely outside of your conscious awareness, and then it just hands you the result as a feeling. That spark you feel actually arrives after the evaluation is already done and dusted.
Now, a really fascinating concept here is something called high salience. Basically, when you feel that chemistry, your brain has simply tagged this new person as highly salient, meaning they are definitely worth paying attention to. But how exactly does it decide that? Well, through a fast pattern matching system. See, your brain is totally wired to feel drawn to features that echo your early environment. It's basically matching perceptual templates, voices, faces, or little mannerisms encoded during your formative years. When someone matches those templates, your brain sends a signal that feels like recognition. It feels like you've known them forever. But catch this, that just means they're familiar. If chaos or emotional unavailability was part of your early environment, someone who recreates that dynamic will feel incredibly compelling, not because they're actually right for you, but just because they fit an old, familiar pattern. And that brings us to arousal misattribution, which is an absolutely massive piece of this puzzle. When we feel that intense spark, we think it's pure excitement, right? Biologically, however, it's actually way closer to fear. When you encounter someone potentially significant, your brain releases adrenaline and norepinephrine. Those are the exact same chemicals that flood your system when you're anxious or like facing a physical threat. So those romantic butterflies in your stomach, yeah, that is actually a stress response. Your heart beats faster, your palms get sweaty, you feel hyper alert. But the thing is, your brain isn't really great at distinguishing between different types of physiological arousal. So your body gets activated, your brain looks around, sees an attractive person, and completely mistakenly attributes that anxiety-like stress response to romantic love. Wild, right?
Section 1. Safety versus nervous system activation. Let's look at how genuine connection versus intense chemistry affects your body in completely different ways.
Think of the contrast like this. Secure attachment is grounded in emotional regulation. It feels stable, safe, and calming, kind of like deep roots. Your nervous system can actually just settle down into a secure base. But emotional intensity, which again we so often confuse for a spark, that's driven by a fear response and hypervigilance. It's much more like a storm. You aren't relaxed, you're activated. Sure, you might feel energized, but it's an anxious energy, entirely driven by the need to secure a bond that doesn't actually feel safe. This crucial difference is perfectly captured in a quote from our sources. Their internal validation system is already switched on. They don't need a ping on their phone to feel seen. This beautifully describes the emotionally regulated, securely attached individual. Because their nervous system isn't desperately seeking external co-regulation from some chaotic source, they have a remarkably high threshold for solitude. They rely on their own internal, steady baseline rather than needing constant, frantic reassurance to just feel safe in a relationship.
Section 2. The intermittent reinforcement loop. Now that we understand the baseline biology, let's uncover the hidden trap that makes chaotic, unpredictable relationships feel so dangerously addictive. Okay, so there are 4 main types of intermittent reinforcement, which is a concept first discovered by psychologist B.F. Skinner. Intermittent reinforcement basically happens when rewards are delivered unpredictably rather than consistently. The absolute most powerful of these is the variable ratio schedule. Think of it like a slot machine. You never actually know when the payout is coming, so what do? You just keep pulling the lever. In relationships, if a partner alternates unpredictably between warmth and coldness, your brain becomes hyper-focused on earning that next moment of connection. You literally get hooked on the uncertainty. And this creates a brutal physical toll on your body. When an unpredictable partner withdraws, your system gets completely flooded with cortisol, the stress hormone. You feel panic, your thoughts start to spiral, and you experience genuine physiological distress. Then, out of nowhere, when they suddenly show warmth again, your brain releases this massive wave of oxytocin, the bonding hormone. You feel this overwhelming, rushing sense of relief. And here's the danger. Your brain begins to crave this massive swing from cortisol-driven panic to oxytocin-fueled calm. Over time, your neural pathways literally rewire around this loop, making a totally toxic dynamic feel like a biological necessity.
Section 3. Craving chaos versus predictability. Let's explore how this biological roller coaster actively sabotages who we actually choose to date.
To really understand this sabotage, we have to redefine a very famous chemical for a second: dopamine. We usually call it the pleasure chemical, right? But actually, scratch that. It's much more accurate to call it the pursuit chemical. See, dopamine doesn't reward you for getting what you want. It highly motivates you to go after it. It spikes the highest during the anticipation of a reward, and it absolutely thrives on novelty and uncertainty. In the early days of a relationship, your dopamine is running high because everything is fresh and unknown. But the real problem arises when your brain starts to confuse the dopamine hit of sheer unpredictability with genuine relationship potential.
Which brings us to a super confusing reality for a lot of people. Why do secure partners so often feel, well, boring? Here's the thing. If your nervous system has been calibrated by past experiences or intermittent reinforcement to literally need chaos, highs and lows just to feel engaged, a secure, steady, reliable partner might actually trigger anxiety. I know, it sounds backward, but their consistency feels destabilizing because your brain is just sitting there constantly waiting for the catch. The emotional availability you've always said you wanted suddenly triggers all of these protective defenses you built back when love wasn't safe or predictable.
So, how on earth do we break out of this biological trap? Section 4. The Spark Reality Check. Let's look at some highly practical questions from our sources to help you evaluate your own relationship patterns in real time.
Question number 1 to ask yourself: do I feel safe or activated? You really need to tune into your body for this one. Genuine excitement in a healthy connection feels energized, for sure, but fundamentally secure. You feel grounded. On the flip side, emotional intensity often feels like your nervous system is just stuck in overdrive. If you feel constantly on edge, anxious, or like you're constantly walking on eggshells around this person, that's activation, guys. That's not a genuine connection.
Question 2. Does interest survive consistency? This one is a huge diagnostic clue. Just notice if your attraction and interest remain strong when the relationship is actually calm and predictable. Or does the spark only seem to magically show up when there's drama, unpredictability, and a real risk of loss? If the connection just vanishes the moment things become peaceful, you are almost definitely chasing a dopamine loop, not a partner.
Question 3. Am I drawn to the person or the projection? Look, a secure connection deepens based on real, tangible data. As you learn more about a person's actual character, their values, how they treat you on a random Tuesday, the bond grows. But emotional intensity, that often peaks with distance and ambiguity. If your interest is at its absolute highest when they're unavailable or hard to read, your brain is probably just projecting a fantasy onto them to fill in the blanks.
And this all brings us to the ultimate solution: pacing. Pacing is absolutely your greatest protective tool against that 100 millisecond biological glitch we talked about earlier. See, the spark creates this false sense of urgency, this intense feeling that you have to lock this down right now. But honestly, that's just the dopamine talking. Slowing things down allows your conscious, rational judgment to finally catch up with your lightning-fast reward chemistry. It gives you the actual time needed to gather real data about who this person is, ultimately protecting you from simply repeating familiar past traumas.
Which leaves us with this final provocative thought to consider today. Will you let your biology make the choice, or will you slow down to see who is really there? The spark is real, but it's just biology doing what biology does, running pattern recognition and releasing some chemicals. It is not prophecy. But once you understand the mechanics behind it, you gain the power to feel that spark, observe it, and still consciously choose a secure, genuine connection. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I really hope this gives you a whole new lens on the science of attraction. See you next time.